Did you know if the internet was a country, it would be the 5th largest polluter on planet Earth? In this episode of Design Ahead, we're going to be looking at why digital sustainability is a crucial topic that everybody needs to understand right now. So welcome back to the Design Ahead podcast with me, Jake Fernandes. We are on episode 3 now, which means that one more episode and we're ahead of most podcasts that have ever existed, as I'm pretty sure there's something in there about most podcasts never getting past 3 episodes. But anyway, today we're talking about digital sustainability. Now, what do I mean when I say the words digital sustainability? If we take the sustainability part, you might think of things like recycling and using public transport, which are definitely correct. But when we talk about digital sustainability, it can be a little bit trickier to understand what that actually means. So today we're going to dive into what it actually means. We're going to look at why it's so important and some of the ideas that you can start to use in your day-to-day life, whether you're just somebody who uses a laptop to send emails and join Teams meetings, or if you're somebody who's involved in marketing or product development. So there's definitely a lot of key learnings for everybody within this podcast today. One of the core messages within this is going to be change at scale. Now, what I mean by this is that if you're somebody who creates marketing materials, or if you're somebody who builds websites or products to be used by other people, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be used by much more than 100 or 1,000 people. So you need to think about the changes that you can make and the data transfer sizes that are going to be magnified on the scale of your user base. So it's not just a case of reducing a file size by 1 megabyte and you save the equivalent of that. That 1 megabyte saving is going to be multiplied by how many users are going to access that. So that's what I just want to keep in everybody's mind as we go through the podcast, is change at scale and where you have an impact in that. So this is an area that I've researched quite a bit. I've done some presentations and podcasts in the past around it, and there's a lot of good material already out there. So I will reference the items that I've learned from, the books I've read, the blogs and other presentations that I've seen over the years. I'll reference them towards the end and kind of keep them nicely bundled together. But what I would like to do right now is take some of the ideas that I've explored in my blog posts. So I wrote a 4-piece blog post over the summer, which looked at the initial understanding of digital sustainability. It looked at methodologies, it looked at attitudes in sustainable design, and it also looked at the future. So what are some companies trying to do right now to prepare themselves, or what are the challenges we might face with technologies like AI and the metaverse? But right now we're going to start right at the beginning and we're going to look at what is sustainable design and why is it so important. So in a sentence, digital sustainability is understanding the impact that digital technologies have on the environment and knowing how we can make a change. So it's a very broad area and it goes from something as small as sending an email to building a huge crypto mining farm in the middle of China. So you can kind of see how this is going to be anything related to digital technologies, digital products, whether that be a physical entity or an online virtual entity. And what we need to do is we need to understand how this contributes to the global climate emissions. And essentially it is power consumption. Now, if you're building a server farm or if you're building a data center, that's going to be using a lot of power to power those machines. But also, if you're sending an email to someone, there's going to be power required to send that email, to power the laptop, to power the data cables that send that across to the recipient through, obviously, however that is sent. I'm not going to get into the details of how the internet works right now, but you can kind of start to grasp the generic concept and understand that it is all about power consumption. The way I like to look at it is through the iceberg concept. And for anyone who isn't familiar with what I mean by this, essentially you have an iceberg and at the waterline, you have the visible part, which is above the waterline. So these are going to be things like sending an email, building a data center. These are all going to be tangible things, whether that's physical or virtual, but you can understand the actual item at play that is consuming the energy. And then once we look below the surface, that is the larger part of the iceberg. And basically, it's all just about poorly optimized methodologies. It's how these products are built, how the devices around them that transmit these items like emails and downloads are built, and knowing if they have considered sustainable design practices in their creation. So this is one of the biggest problems, is that if you have a very poorly optimized service or site, it's going to use a lot more power to get the basics done. If you're using a lot of videos and images on a site, that's going to use far more energy than a text-based site is, for example. So you can start to see how poorly optimized methodologies are the real cause for the entire power consumption of a poorly optimized site. So there are three main attitudes in which we need to consider when we're looking at sustainability. The first is to consume less, and this is your recycling, this is your using single-use plastics and, well, not using single-use plastics, and public transport, cycling, all of those things. These are things that an individual might do in their day-to-day lives to help contribute to society and contribute to the problem. But the issue with this is it becomes a moral win for individuals. So if we look at an example of a transatlantic flight, you'd have to reuse a plastic bag every single day for 25 years just to cover the cost of one trip. So you can already see how these items, although they are definitely important, they are more of a moral win for an individual. They don't really make much of a difference, especially when you've got celebrities taking multiple private jets everywhere they go. It does feel like a bit of an insult when whoever it is, the government or whoever it might be, saying to you, please recycle, do all of this, you're going to help the environment. And then it's like a kick in the teeth to see people just taking the mick with some of their own habits and clearly not doing their part. But then we take a step up, which is to contribute more. So this is all about volunteering, getting involved in your local communities, or contributing to a green cause. So if the average US citizen contributed 10% of their salary, which works out about $3,000, to a green initiative, they would save around about 3,000 tons of CO2 equivalent, which is what we measure carbon dioxide emissions in, per year. So that works out at around about 2,000 transatlantic flights every single year. So you can already see how going from recycling and using one plastic bag to save one flight over 25 years, you can then make such a difference of contributing to these green initiatives to save 2,000 flights per year. But that brings me on to the third point, and it gets home that below the surface of the iceberg point of collaborating better. It's all about methodologies. It's all about building technologies that consider sustainable green practices at heart. Now, I'm going to use another analogy. I'm going to use the analogy of Google, which has around 3 billion unique monthly visitors every single month. So if they were to optimize their site by reducing the file size by 1 megabyte, that is going to be multiplied by 3 billion every single month. So that works out at around about 3 petabytes, I believe. And again, that's around about 100 to 500 transatlantic flights. That's just 1 megabyte. That's not putting $3,000 into a company. That's not reusing something over and over again. That's reducing a file size by 1 megabyte. Removing one image from a site or compressing something. It's absolutely minuscule. And again, it's a bit facetious to say that because Google is an incredibly well optimized site. Of course, there isn't images on the homepage and things like that, but you kind of get the idea how such a small difference can make such a large impact when you multiply it at scale. So we've now understood what is digital sustainability, why is it important, and what are the attitudes that go alongside it. Let's take a little look at what people can do in their day-to-day lives, regardless of who you are, and also have a look at some more industry-specific applications. So the average person, if you're somebody who isn't creating products or creating marketing materials or generally making something that's going to be distributed to a large user base, you can still consider, the fact that you're sending emails to people, the fact that you're joining meetings, the fact that you've got a laptop or a computer on, that's going to be consuming energy every time that you do something. So what you can do in emails, for example, is you can compress file sizes. If you've got a PDF that's going to be 10 megabytes, you might not have compressed all of the images or all of the information in there. So there's so many free conversion tools that you can use online. You can pop that file into the conversion tool, compress it down, and then get something that might be only a megabyte or possibly even less than that. And then once you save that, you've reduced the carbon emissions of that file send by 10 times just by doing something really simple. And it's a 5-second task. It's an upload, it's a quick convert, and then it's a download. So do try to think about the day-to-day tasks that you might be doing, or if you're sending across a presentation or even presenting through Teams, it's important to understand the file sizes and understand if you can compress things down, make things smaller, or reduce clutter. If there's loads of images on there, are people really interested in all of those images? Or can you get rid of some? Can you shorten some of your presentations so it gets more to the point? And less is more, essentially, is the message here. So now let's look a little bit towards user researchers or people who are initially setting up projects. So anybody that's creating user journeys or user personas, feel free to create one for the environment. And now, this might sound a little bit cheesy, but stay with me here. So if we're creating a user persona for a specific use case for a product, create one for the environment or create one for the world and just list some of the pain points, some of the considerations, and possibly some of the goals that an environmentally sound product would achieve. So if I'm designing something for a clothing brand, I might consider the environment and think of things like fast fashion, of course, think of things like end of life, and sustainable materials, things that I'm going to be using to create the products. So ultimately, it's all about prioritizing some of those sustainable features. So I might create that persona for the environment. I might list some of those items, and some of the goals for it would be to promote sustainable designs, promote sustainable fashion, and guide users towards those choices. If we then look towards graphic designers, UX designers, the people who are designing what the product's going to look like, there are so many different elements that you can consider that you might never have actually thought before. Web fonts are a really good example because a web font is stored within the browser, which means that it doesn't require any file transfers. So if I've got a website that's using a bespoke typeface, I would have to upload that file into the system, and then when the user visits the website, they would download it themselves. If we're looking at that scale of millions of people, that's going to be millions of times that somebody's going to have to visit my site, download the custom typeface, and then hopefully cache it. But if we use a web font, there's no need to transfer a file over for the typeface. We can also think about colors, so grayscale reduces energy consumption massively. Of course, if the internet was just black and white, pardon the pun, then it's going to be quite boring. And, of course, colors do make things pop. They're part of brand identities. So it's trying to understand where you could possibly use grayscale. You can maybe tone back some of the visual elements. In a similar fashion, if you think about your media usage, so using videos or animations are super energy consuming. They're huge files. They're going to be often repeated. They might be on auto load, so there's no option for the user but to play them, especially if you're loading up sites like, a YouTube page, for example. So think about other things that you could use in that place. So could you use an image or could you use a GIF, which is far less energy consuming than a video is? Animations, are they providing something? Are they just looking fancy for the sake of it? Can you kind of reduce that? And yes, it might not be as cool and flashy, but you could also just say that this design has been made in a sustainable way. You can put a badge on the site, and I think hopefully there will be a really good reputable company that will make some sort of design certification for sustainable products. So yeah, it's all about getting that message that it doesn't have to look all flashy and amazing. Let's get the idea of sustainability across, and that is just as valuable. And then looking towards developers, like you guys are the gatekeepers of obviously what goes onto a website. So can you think about any files that you get sent over? Are they compressed already? Could they be compressed before they are uploaded? When you're thinking about code as well, like are you creating clean code or is it quite messy? Could you even refactor some of that messy code? Just making sure that everything's as clean, reducing the file size as much as possible, and making sure that whatever's uploaded has been considered from a digital sustainability perspective. I could go on with analogies, but I hope that gets the point across that it's all about scale, it's all about reducing file size, it's about reducing energy consumption within those technologies as much as you possibly can. Of course, there's going to be boundaries because we're not just going to have everything that's a black and white text website. Yes, it doesn't really consume much energy, but it just isn't going to be used. So think about how you can still keep the product as viable as it needs to be and reduce file size where you can. So let's talk a little bit about resources. Digital sustainability is a very new topic, I think. It's been around for a while, but it seems to be emerging with a lot of key speakers, a lot of presentations, and a lot of companies that are starting to pioneer some of these ideas over the past couple of years. So in particular, Tom Greenwood at Wholegrain Digital was a massive inspiration. There's a couple of his presentations online on YouTube that I would highly recommend watching. He talks all about some of these concepts. He dives into some of the ideas a little bit more. So, the web font idea was something I took from his presentations, but he also goes into a lot more detail about how images are made up, and even just blurring the sides of images can reduce file size. So he's got a lot of great learnings. I'd strongly recommend checking out some of his presentations and blog posts online. There's also UK Gov who've been doing a lot of work around this, in particular Defra. There's some working groups that have been set up. They've, again, put out some presentations and blog posts that I would highly recommend. Just have a Google to see what they've been putting out more recently, because, again, it's sort of an evolving topic. So anything that I might list now might be a little bit outdated by the time you end up watching this, if it is in the future. And I'd also strongly recommend to read What We Owe the Future by William MacAskill. It's a really good book. It's not really taken from the point of digital sustainability, but more of a general sustainability perspective. But some of the references and analogies that he used are absolutely incredible. That's where I got the idea for the plastic bag, I'm pretty sure, and the transatlantic flight saving if you were to save 10% of your salary. There's a lot of incredible stuff in there. He even goes far back as sort of the slave trade to show how some of the ideas and practices that were put in place to put an end to the slave trade, have been tried to be continued throughout, and why it takes such incredible perseverance by a small community of people to make change. And it's just really, really positive. It's really thought-provoking and motivational as well. For anybody that's interested in this world, I would really, really recommend it. So thank you all for listening today. I will put those references in the description below. Please do feel free to drop a like, drop a rating wherever you get your podcast and are viewing this. I have also set up some social media accounts on Instagram and TikTok at Let's Design Ahead. So I'm going to be dropping more short form content, so sort of quick tips, quick hacks, any small ideas that I can fit into sort of 30 to 45 seconds, I will drop on those channels. So do drop a follow. Again, I'll link my accounts in the description below. I'd also be quite interested to getting some guests on the show. So if you've got any ideas, or again, if you're a subject matter expert yourself in the creative industry in particular, and you have a significant angle, so it might be AI, it might be sustainability like today, or the metaverse, something that's kind of groundbreaking or a new concept, a new way of thinking, definitely reach out to me. Drop me a message on my socials, drop a comment of any recommendations that you think would be great to reach out to. I'm also available on LinkedIn at Jake Fernandes. Again, link will be in the description. And again, also any ideas of future podcasts or anything that you'd like to hear about. Maybe there's some emerging topics that you've just found out about and think would be great for me to learn and share. Please drop anything as a good suggestion. There's no such thing as a bad suggestion. Yeah, that's going to be it for it. So again, thank you so much for watching and listening. Please do drop a rating and a follow, and I will catch you guys in episode 4.